Here are 8 players you need to trade for right now in fantasy football for week 9. And to kick it off, I'm going to say trade for Amon-Ra St. Brown. Going back to week 13 of last year when he had his explosive breakout that won a lot of people fantasy championships, he hasn't had a dip this far in production. So this is the lowest you can buy him. We just got news of TJ Hockenson being traded to the Vikings. So that frees up a lot of targets in that offense. And Amon-Ra St. Brown has been so far a target machine. Going back to the week 13 when he broke out, he has yet to get less than 10 targets in any game when he's fully healthy. So that is 9 straight games of 10 plus targets. The only games this year that he hasn't reached that was 2 games where he played 30% or less of the snaps and 1 game where he played through an injury and saw reduced snaps in week 3. And in that game, he still saw 9 targets. So in the past 4 weeks that he's played, 2 of those games, like I said, 30% or less snaps, which you really can excuse those games just because of how little he played through injury, or because of injury, he didn't play much. And in those games, he saw 4 points and 1 point. The other 2 games in the last 4, he got about 10 points in half PPR. So it's a pretty good buy low opportunity for a player getting that many targets. And seeing now, we have available targets for the Lions. So and he demands targets because he's a good player. So it's not just that they're hyper-targeting him for no reason. He's 3rd in targets per route run with 33.6. That's over a third of his routes he's being targeted. So he's getting open. He's a great player, and he's demanding those targets. We still have at least 3 more weeks, according to reports, before Jameson Williams gets into the picture. And even if he does, with the Hockenson vacuum and everything, I still see him as a borderline top 12 option going forward. I'm buying him as an elite player, a wide receiver 1 going forward. And yeah, I'm willing to spend up to get Amon-Ra St. Brown.
All right, so my first trade target is going to be Diontae Johnson, the Pittsburgh Steelers. As everyone's probably heard, Chase Claypool did get traded to the Bears, which is actually good for everyone involved. Helps Justin Fields and the Bears offense, helps Chase Claypool, helps the Steelers wide receivers become more fantasy relevant. So Diontae Johnson, especially in PPR, he's averaging 9.5 targets a game, and he has yet to score a touchdown. He's had multiple times where he's caught the ball in the end zone and just either was unable to drag both feet in bounds, or he's had a touchdown or 2 negated due to penalty. So whatever it is, he just has not been able to score. He's been unlucky in that department. But their schedule is the number 1 or number 3 easiest schedule for wide receiver the rest of the year. So they should have some great matchups. Their defense still isn't that good. They're giving up tons of points, which means they should always have to pass, and they'll be chasing points. And shout out to Jacob Gibbs on Twitter. If you want to follow him, he posts a lot of targets and target percentages and everything, a bunch of good stats. But he said over the last 2 years since Chase Claypool was drafted, Diontae Johnson is 14% more likely to see a target whenever Chase Claypool isn't on the field. So if he's already seeing 9.5 targets a game, and that even goes up by 14%, so if you're looking at 1 to 1.5 to 2 more targets a game, that's huge, especially in PPR, because that gives him a 2-point higher floor. And I mean, if he only gets 8 yards with each of those, that's still 3 more points a game, and it just ups his odds of getting a touchdown. So it hasn't been pretty, and the owner with Diontae Johnson's probably pretty frustrated. So if you could get him for pretty cheap, then I would certainly do it as a high-end flex to wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 2 range.
Yep, in any PPR format, I think that he's a great player to target right now. Like you said, he's very cheap. That 9.5 targets per game you talked about, that's 3rd in the league. He's 8th in air yards with 97. The problem has been twofold so far. It's that a lot of those air yards have been unrealized dealing with a rookie quarterback. He's got 470 unrealized air yards, which is 2nd in the league. So if that number can get just a little bit better, he has a lot of upside. And like you said, yet to get a touchdown. And that is huge. And that's something we talked about a lot last week when we said trade for Alvin Kamara, is that he's getting all these touches like Deontay's getting. He's getting all these targets, including end zone targets and all that, but hasn't just connected yet. A lot of that comes down to just variability and just luck. And not that we expect him to do what Kamara did and get a 3-touchdown game, but the touchdowns will eventually come when you're getting targeted. He's got like you said, 9.5 targets a game. The touchdowns will come. And Claypool being out of the picture frees up 6.3 targets per game and 65 air yards per game. So they don't really have a guy that's going to come in and demand that many targets. They just don't have it on the roster. So it's definitely going to go to Pickens and Diontae Johnson. A lot of it will. So they're going to see a little bit of a bump. And hopefully if he gets some touchdowns in the mix, then he will be a good player to target and get him on the cheap.
Yep.
All right. My next player to target is Raheem Mostert. It's tough with running backs because there is a tier, a top tier of running backs and then a huge drop off to me. And the reason I say target Raheem Mostert is because he just had a subpar game, his worst since one of his worst since he's become like the starter. And he is on the cusp to me of that tier that's like a really good running back. It's just, once you get past like Miles Sanders, Raheem Mostert, it falls off a cliff to me. So he's one of those players that he's still startable as an RB2 every single week. So if you can get him on the cheap this week, his metrics are pretty good, not amazing. His yards per game, I think he's about almost 5 yards per carry. So he's somewhat efficient. He's on a really good offense that's looking really good, and there should be a lot of touchdown opportunities. So he's going to have explosive weeks, and you like to see that. They did just trade away Chase Edmonds, but they did in return, they got Jeff Wilson. So I think that's about a lateral move for Raheem Mostert. I still think he'll be the lead back. I don't think there's anything to worry about there. We saw those two players together on the 49ers for a few years, and obviously he is the better running back. Really what's hurt his yards per carry compared to San Francisco is not only the offensive scheme, but also he just hasn't broke off a ton of long runs, which is what he was really known for in San Francisco. He could break off 80-yard runs, which he did very frequently, and he really hasn't had that this year, but I expect that will come eventually. He will get a couple of those plays and get you really big weeks. So if you could trade for him on the cheap off of a bad game, I would do that for Raheem Mostert.
Yep. I targeted him in a few leagues and was unsuccessful. So people seem to know that he is, a good running back, solid RB2 for your lineup every week. So if you can get him for around that price, I would certainly do so. Well, my next guy is going to be Courtland Sutton, the Denver Broncos. And this is a guy you can probably get really cheap right now. I know he has a lot of name value, but he has been absolutely dreadful over the past 3 to 4 weeks. Like, I'm talking 7 points or less in PPR. It's been bad. But you can get him really cheap, I would assume. And the Broncos have the number 1 easiest remaining schedule for wide receivers. And surprisingly enough, thus far in the season, they've actually played a pretty tough schedule for wide receivers. It doesn't look like it based on some of the opponents that they've played, but now that we have more data, they've actually had a pretty tough receiver schedule. So it's going to get a lot easier for them for the rest of the season. I don't believe he can be as bad as he's been over the past month going forward. I think he's just too good of a player. I think this is their bye week right now. I think they're going to go into the bye week, figure some things out. I think they're going to come out of the bye week a little bit more wanting to get him and Judy the ball both, and they're going to do a more concerned effort of that.
Yeah, so for the thing is, I've seen questions on forums and things, and people online asking questions on if he's droppable. So you can buy him for so cheap, literally offering your lowest bench pieces. You really don't have to pay up, and we're not saying pay up for Courtland Sutton right now. His value is very low. So if he can just get back to similar production to what he was doing in the first 5 weeks, then he can definitely get you a solid flex play, and you could offer some of your bench pieces. You could probably trade Romeo Doubs right now for Courtland Sutton if you wanted to off of a big week. And I would probably make a move like that. Just take somebody who just had a big week, try to flip him. Definitely don't pay up for Courtland Sutton, but I think it'll get better from here. And that leads me to my next buy, which is Jamar Chase. Now, this is very situational. Not every team should be trading for Jamar Chase. If you have 2 wins, you should not be trading for Jamar Chase. Only if you have 0, 1, or 2 losses, in my opinion, should you trade for Jamar Chase. he is the perfect trade for Target because you can form a trade that can work for both parties. So if a team lost Ja'Marr Chase and they need a win to get into the playoffs, they absolutely should be shopping Ja'Marr Chase. And if you have been doing really well and you're just prepping for the playoffs, then you can make a mutually beneficial deal. So if you're one of these teams who has 0-1 or 2 losses, you got a strong winning record, then I would just run the tires on Ja'Marr Chase, see if you can get him somewhat cheap. He does have a hip injury, which he probably will need off-season surgery for, but he's going to come back probably, I would guess, in 3 to 4 weeks. They have a bye week in 3 weeks, so my guess would be that he's going to sit at least through then, and then probably come back in the next week or two after that. And when he does, I do think that the injury, I've heard that the injury may hurt his production a little bit, but we've seen that offense needs him, man. Like, that game against the Browns, it seems like they really need him, and they're going to force him the ball when he gets back. They're a team that's definitely wanting to make the playoffs, and they're making a run. So when he gets back, they're going to hyper-target him again, in my opinion. So if you're one of these winning teams, trade for Ja'Marr Chase.
Yeah, I agree. And the type of trades we're thinking about right now is going to be like, so if you're a winning team, offer the team that may need to win now, offer them guys like Christian Kirk or Tyler Lockett or Michael Pittman, guys around that value. Because if you only have 2 losses or less right now, you're not going to miss those guys really over the next 3 weeks. However, for the team that is struggling, those guys could be vital in helping them secure a win that Ja'Marr Chase isn't right now. And then for you getting Ja'Marr Chase, you can afford 1 or 2 losses over the next 3 weeks and just wait for him to come back. And then once he comes back, you now have a top 5 wide receiver that you just inserted into your lineup.
Yeah, you could send them 2 starting players that they need desperately. You know, I know I'm in a league where a guy lost Breece Hall, lost Ja'Marr Chase. He is willing to deal Ja'Marr Chase for 2 starting players. You could send players like DJ Moore, who's hot right now, Juju, who's hot right now, Jacoby Myers. All these guys are producing, and honestly, it could be a good trade for the Ja'Marr Chase owner if they're, desperately needing to make the playoffs. So I think you can make a great deal with Ja'Marr Chase.
Yep, I agree. So my third person is going to be tight end Dalton Schultz. So he's on a bye this week, so that might actually help you get him a little bit cheaper than if he was playing, if his manager needs to win. But his usage has went up 3 straight weeks, which is what you love to see, considering he was very, very slow coming off that knee injury that he suffered. He had a lot of bad games in a row. He wasn't running many routes. He wasn't getting many targets. But that seems to be a thing of the past. So the past few games since Dak has been back, he's looked a lot better. He's getting targets. He's looking well. Every usage rate has gone up over the past 3 weeks. Snaps, route run percentage, targets, catches, yards, every single thing across the board has went up 3 games in a row, which is a good sign. It's showing positive progression. Over the last 7 full games that Dak has played in this offense, Dalton Schultz actually has more catches, more yards, and more touchdowns than CeeDee Lamb. Not saying that he's better than CeeDee Lamb, obviously, but Dak loves to use tight ends. He loves to spread it around. He's not going to hyper-target CeeDee Lamb like some other number 1 receivers get hyper-targeted. So I think Dalton Schultz is going to be a cheaper way for you to buy into this Dallas offense, which looks really good between the running backs, the receivers, the quarterbacks. The defense is playing well, giving the offensive plenty of chances. So Dallas is a good team, and this is an offense you want pieces of. And tight end being as sucky of a position as it is outside of Kelsey and Mark Andrews, I think Dalton Schultz is a pretty good buy for you to try to sneak off your one of your league mates' benches this week. Because like I said, he's on bye, so he's not going to be in anybody's lineup. So you might could get him just for a bench player, maybe send the tight end you currently have and a bench player and see if you can make a swap right there.
Yeah, because of the passing volume that Dak brings to the table, and combine that with the success that Dalton Schultz has seen when Dak is on the field, he's going to be one of those tight ends that actually can get you pretty consistent values even without a touchdown. And it's pretty hard to find that at tight end. So if you're one of these players struggling at tight end, I would definitely try to make a deal because he can just get you a consistent 10 points in that position and even provide upside. He hasn't seen a touchdown this year, but obviously that will come eventually, and then he'll have some 15 to 20 point weeks, which is really good at tight end and provides you some floor. which is hard to come by. And my last buy is Davante Adams. Now, this is obviously a really expensive buy compared to the other ones we've talked about, but you're really not going to get another opportunity to buy Adams. So if there's any kind of worry going around and you can get him just a little cheaper than you should, then this is the week to do it. 5 targets, 1 catch for 3 yards. I mean, there is no way that this happens again this season for Davante Adams. I mean, this is below his floor. They scored 0 points on offense. That is unsustainably bad. You know, I mean, there's just no way they don't get it together at least better than that. They've been a pretty good offense over the season. Davante Adams has been really good so far in fantasy. I mean, outside of that, this last week, I mean, he's been amazing for fantasy. He's been nearly 20 points per game in PPR. So, I mean, this is probably your only chance to buy him. I know it's expensive, but expect more of what you saw before this week. He was dealing with an illness. Apparently, there's a report that said he's still dealing with that illness. I don't know the details of that, but regardless of if that's an excuse for his performance or not, they're going to try to get him the ball more. He did play only 72% of the snaps, which was his lowest by far. He hadn't seen less than 95%, so I'm guessing that illness had something to do with it. And scoring 0 points, they're going to need to get it together, and they're definitely going to target their best player, or arguably their best player, more. And Josh Jacobs had a bad week as well, so just expect that offense to bounce back in general.
Yeah, so on the season, Davante Adams is still the wide receiver 8, and he's had a bye week and that 1-point game. So even though he's already had a bye and a 1-point game, he's still the wide receiver 8. Dude is as elite as they come. Yep. So buy low now. And actually, if you want to hear another crazy stat for Davante Adams, this is the first time in 81 consecutive games that he has had less than 2 or more catches.
Wow.
81 consecutive games of having more than 1 catch.
That's crazy.
That is crazy.
Yep.
So I think he's probably going to let the coaches hear about that, and I don't see this happening again.
Locked in top 10 receiver. If you can get less than that in value, if you can get, the 10 to 15 range of value for him, do it. He's top 10 locked in.
Yep. All right, and for my last guy, my past 3 have been sort of buy lows. This one's going to be a buy at cost or buy high, if you want to say. Mine is Miles Sanders, a running back for the Philadelphia Eagles. So he has a super easy schedule the rest of the season. The only team left on the Eagles' entire schedule that I think could even compete with them is going to be the Cowboys, and that doesn't come until late into the season. The Eagles have looked dominant. They love to run the ball. They run the ball more than any team in the league, and they're going to be playing a ton of defenses that, A, can't stop the run, and they're playing against a ton of offenses that can't score, so they're not going to have to pass to chase points. I know this past week looks a little weird. Jalen Hurts had 4 passing touchdowns. That was kind of uncharacteristic for their offense because I believe going into that game, Jalen Hurts only had 4 passing touchdowns. So they're a much heavier running team, and I expect them to go back to that style whenever they're playing a team that's not just a leaky faucet at receiver. He's still getting all the goal line touches other than, Jalen Hurts scoring on his runs. But he is their main guy. He's getting the bulk of the main and important touches, and they're going to be playing with the lead so often that they're going to lean on the run more. So he's averaging about 15 to 17 carries a game right now, which I don't see changing. So if you need a strong RB2 that has a weekly RB1 upside that's not going to cost you a ton of value, I think Miles Sanders is a guy to target right now.
Yep, like you said, not exactly a buy low, but before this game, the past 5 games, he had not seen less than 15 carries, which is really good, especially on an elite offense with a great offensive line. He continues to be efficient with 5 yards per carry, and there's going to be a lot of touchdowns to go around. So, again, he's one of those running backs that I trust going forward. He's in that top tier before that big drop-off. So, if you can move one of those lower players and get him, absolutely do it, even if you need a package and send a couple of players over. All right, is that your last buy?
Yep, that's my last guy.
All right, well, those have been our 8 players that you need to trade for in week 9. Please subscribe. We've really appreciated y'all's support. We've got a new goal of 500 subscribers, so if you could help us hit that, we'd super appreciate it. Leave a comment. We answer every comment, asking for advice, trade advice, waiver advice, start sits, all that. We'll answer it in the comments, so Drop us a comment, leave us a like, subscribe. We really appreciate it. Thank you guys for tuning in. We have been the Fantasy Bros. We are